All right, it looks like we're at time. Jennifer, should we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Audrey Hogan. I'm the COO at TimeForge Labor Management. I want to go over some of the studies, particularly that we've done on the industry recently, and share the insights and data that we're seeing and what that's telling us about how we should be reacting from an ops and HR perspective to the labor shortage and what's working, because there are things that are working. That's going to be the focus of today's presentation. We're going to start with where we are as an industry, how the labor shortage is impacting employers. We're going to breeze through that because I think that if you're attending this webinar, you probably already know how it's impacting your organization. We're going to look at the data from those 4 studies. I'm not going to go in depth on that data. I will be happy to provide links to those studies so that you can dive into the data and the methodologies behind them and look at those insights and see how they apply to your business. We're going to run through what I call a labor health check, a list of metrics, insights, things you should know about your organization pretty inherently. We're going to start simple and get more complicated. Happy to provide that checklist to you if you want. And then we're going to go through a quick overview of TimeForge at the end. So a little bit about me. I am, despite the SHRM SCP after my name, I'm actually an operations person. I grew up in retail, general retail, and in restaurants, in restaurant leadership. I've worked in a lot of industries, and I've always been on the operations side. I like the hustle and bustle of brick and mortar. And on the software side, I really enjoy getting to close that gap through smart solutions. Early in my career, I pivoted to learning HR because there was so much overlap between operations and HR. And I was recognizing among customers that I was working with that there wasn't a lot of like holistic processes and conversations around things that needed to happen at store level that really were impacting HR, right? Like compliance or budgeting or staffing. So I pivoted to learn HR so that I could help a little bit more holistically. TimeForge is a full employee lifecycle platform, labor solution. Feel free to look at the website. You can see in depth each of the solutions that we offer. You can mix and match or use it as an all-in-one. So let's dive in. I want to talk a little bit about where we are. So wages are rising. Payroll costs might be rising or not, depending on how much turnover you've had recently, right? So you're paying more per hour on average, likely, but you may not have as many hours to be paying. I mentioned productivity metrics here look high. We've had a lot of experts in the industry who get really excited, labor experts, about how productive restaurants, hospitality, retail are right now. And really, we're too productive in a lot of scenarios that 124.5 may not actually be so great. Recruiting is super competitive right now. New hires don't have the experience that we're used to having with new hires. Even for entry-level positions, historically, we've been used to seeing a little bit more knowledge than we have lately, right? It's especially hard to hire for non-entry level positions. And the new hires that we can find often don't last that long. They're sticking around for a couple weeks if they show up for their first day, and then sometimes they're gone within a couple months, or sometimes they stick around. And we're seeing that a lot in the industry as a whole. So I want to look at the data from these studies. Again, I'm going to breeze through these. Happy to share the links. You can find them on our website, all of the data. We've done four total over the last couple of years. So our first study we conducted about a year ago. We worked with our partner CBS North Star, which is our restaurant point of sale, and we looked at retail, and that means retail as a whole, including restaurants and hospitality. Retail employees and their work trends. We wanted to know how those had been impacted post-COVID or during COVID. What we found, the three key takeaways, and there's a lot more data than this, but the three main takeaways that are applicable to what we're talking about right now is that monthly turnover stabilized. So it was still higher than it was pre-COVID, but it stabilized by July of 2021. We also saw that annual turnover was trending down. So it wasn't just normalized and not completely chaotic, but it looked like it was actually heading towards normal, hopefully. And then not surprisingly, shift length, average shift length for retail workers increased. So you had fewer people, each of them working longer hours. None of that was too shocking in that study, but the insights from the data helped us pivot a little bit for our customers as a solution provider. The next study we did was in October. So we partnered with North Country Business Products, who serve general retail and grocery, as well as restaurants. And so we want to know what was working for retailers, again, retail as a whole. We surveyed retailers. 60% of them said that the labor shortage had a significant impact on their business. 60% as of October of last year. We asked them which part of their business had been impacted the most. Over 70% of the respondents said hiring, right? Labor shortage, hiring is going to take a hit. That's pretty straightforward. We asked what methods they were successfully employing to combat the labor shortage. 70% of respondents said employee referrals. 60%, we allowed them to answer multiple questions. 60% said wages, higher wages was helping. And 30% said that recruiting, investing in recruiting, and expanding their recruiting budget was helping. We also asked how long they expected the labor shortage to go on. Every respondent answered somewhere between 18 months and indefinitely. And that was shocking because the retailers we spoke with, the restaurant owners we spoke with on, daily or weekly basis, this is where we live. In conversations, we're often saying, oh, as soon as the government subsidies go away, we'll get back to normal. But we found that the industry as a whole actually had a slightly different opinion from what people were saying to us on the phone or in meetings. We conducted our third study in March. We asked some of the same questions. We wanted to know what's changed since October, primarily. Only 43% of respondents in this study said that the labor shortage was having a significant impact on their business in March, as opposed to the 60%, more than 60% in October. So that told us that people are starting to figure out how to effectively respond to the labor shortage by March. 34% of the respondents said that hiring had been impacted the most. That was 70 in the last study, more than 70. And 24% said that retention had been impacted the most at their business. That's insightful because no one selected retention in October. So we started to see that trickle effect throughout the stores, where we not only were having trouble hiring people, we were having trouble hanging on to people. We asked respondents what the most successful strategies they'd employed to combat the labor shortage had been. In the last study, it was referrals. In this study, they said wage increases, 42%. And then referrals from employees. By March, a lot of businesses had tapped out their employee referral pool. There was no one had any more friends to refer. So that had dropped. And then there was a new item that had not been cited before, which was training. We saw businesses starting to invest in training to combat that turnover problem and improve their retention. This study was slightly different from the last one in that the last section, instead of asking how long the labor shortage was going to go on, their opinions, we asked for open feedback. So any of you who joined today's webinar a little early would have seen this on the screen. This is what we heard from business owners. This is just a sampling of some of the open feedback from business owners we got. Pretty sure many of you can probably relate to some of these comments. This is what we heard from managers. Need to hire more people. I'm having to do a job of 3 people at a time. This is important because managers are feeling it, right? Especially as business leaders, independent operators, C-suite execs, we can see the data and we can know that it's a problem. But often when there's such a significant change or such a significant impact, we're so focused on kind of the blocking and tackling that it's really easy to lose sight of the kind of personal impact that this challenge is having on our managers. These are the comments we weren't expecting to see in this response. Not the managers. This next screen, we've got positive feedback. No problems now. Referrals is key. Someone says they're maintaining staffing at an acceptable level. This blew our minds. We were not expecting so many businesses to give us feedback about how they've stabilized. But this speaks back to our respondents dropping by 17% in citing that they were significantly impacted by the labor shortage, which again tells us that businesses have figured out how to combat the labor shortage and how to stabilize. So we wanted to figure out what they were doing so that we could tell the world and tell our customers. So we just wrapped up our 4th study. We wanted to know how TimeForge users are faring versus the industry at large. What are they doing differently? And can our product help businesses who are struggling with labor? I mean, we think it can, right? Obviously, we're biased, but we want to know that it can. And what parts of it are so helpful. From this study, we found definitively that TimeForge users experienced much lower rates of turnover across the entire period from January 2019 to March 2022. So again, you can find that study, that white paper on our website, and you can dive into the data and the methodology, and we've laid it all out very nice and clean. But the results were shocking. We were hoping that in periods of really high turnover, maybe we shaved off a slight percentage of turnover, or retention was a little bit higher, or we at least delayed the impacts. And what we found was a lot more impressive. The key takeaways from all 4 of these studies, in my opinion, there's other insights, again, if you want to dive into the studies, but there are things you can do. It doesn't have to stay like this. If your business is struggling with labor, people are figuring out how to handle it. Retention strategies are absolutely critical consistently from the businesses who are faring well. They're investing in culture. and employees and managers are feeling it. Culture is going to help combat that. And last, using TimeForge results in better employee retention. At this point, I want to run through our labor health check. It's going to be a really quick checklist. I have detailed explanations on each of these items. If you want them, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share. I just can't dive in. There's not enough time today to dive into every single detail. Happy to walk you through any of it, or if you have questions, reach out. And then after this, I'll show you a little bit of the white paper, the last study that we did. So we're going to start simple. When it comes to your baseline labor numbers, these are things that every business, especially with shift workers, or every business, especially struggling with the labor shortage or impacted by the labor shortage, you guys should be able to answer this off the top of your head, or like with one click in your HRIS or your labor platform. You need to know why people are leaving. You need to know what your turnover rate is, just overall, which managers are at risk of leaving. If you're an enterprise organization with hundreds of stores and hundreds of managers, your regionals need to know who those folks are. You should at least be identifying regions, right, where across the country you may have higher turnover than other regions. Which positions are hardest to staff? Which positions require the most training? And how productive are your employees? Right? None of these are requiring lots of calculations. You don't need spreadsheets to figure these out. These are kind of inherent business answers you should know. So if you don't have these baseline labor numbers right now, you're behind. I'm sorry. We're going to step it up just a little bit. So kind of our opportunistic labor numbers, where we might be able to use these to identify gaps. You should be able to, if not answer these off the top of your head, be able to run a report or get the data to answer these within less than a day. If you're a smaller organization, minutes. If you're a larger organization, you have cross-departmental data that you need to compile, then maybe a day. You need to know what your turnover is by tenure. Are you losing the newbies or the high tenure employees? Both. Which employees are manager track, right? We need to be thinking about who can backfill any managers who are at risk. Why are hard to staff positions hard? Is it hard work? Is there a lack of meat cutters in that particular city? Is there not a training program for those positions? Is the supervisor constantly having a bad day every day? Where can you optimize the training path? So if you don't already have identified training paths, that would be part of this checklist. You need to figure out how you get people up to speed faster, right? Reduce that impact of turnover when someone leaves and you train a newbie. Where can you optimize productivity? Right? This is just identifying gaps. You don't have to do it during this step, but you need to know exactly where you're wasteful, right? That could be food waste, that could be time waste. If every time someone makes, the second most selling item on your menu, they have to walk all the way to the prep station and then back to the grill, right? And there's really no need for that, and it's slowing them down. That might be an identified gap, right? That you can figure out how to optimize later. But you need to know where those optimization opportunities are. And then last, you need to know how you can get people to stay. The magic question, right? Again, we're just looking for gaps here. So how can you get people to stay? It might be better incentives, might be wages. You might need to conduct an actual employee survey. Remember, if you do that, you have to actually act on the feedback you get. We're going to step it up a little bit more. We're going to talk about retention initiatives. You need to be making sure that you have identified career paths that are transparent and available not only to supervisors, but also to the employees themselves. And retention surveys. You need to know why people stick around who stick around, why people leave who leave. You need a formal manager and training program. Every industry calls this something different. In MIT, you need to have a formal, here's how you get to being a manager plan. And you need to market it internally. The employees who are already working with you, who want to grow in their careers with you, need to know that that opportunity exists and exactly how to get there. It can't be amoebas. You need to make knowledge transfer organic. This is back to kind of the culture investment. We want to make sure that we're scheduling our high-skilled, high-experience employees to work similar shifts so that they're overlapping with some of the newbies. Because when they're working together on the same shift, they're just inherently going to share information and help those newbies get up to speed a little bit faster. That helps with that training path. It also plays into your culture. If you have a culture of people bending over to help each other, of community and teamwork, that knowledge transfer is going to happen organically. If anyone in your organization still is saying anything close to, but we've always done it that way, that has to stop. That should have stopped 2 years ago. Everything pivoted. We don't get to say that anymore. It's comfortable, but we don't get to say it anymore. That's another culture shift, and it can be hard to combat, but we don't get to do things the way that we've done them just because that's the way that we've done them. We have to optimize and make smart decisions. So you might do a little culture assessment and see if that's something that's baked into your culture. And I say culture a lot. When I'm talking about culture, I'm not talking about the wishy-washy new age overused term. I'm saying the way things get done around here. That's what culture means. You need to be eliminating the chaos. If there's a plan, you stick to it. That's budgets, that's schedules, that's hiring, that's training. We're past that. We've stabilized enough. It could be chaotic in 2020. It could be chaotic in 2021. Now it's 2022. We've had 2 years to stabilize. We can't continue pivoting and spinning out. And again, you need to focus on culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? We're going to step it up just a little bit more to start getting into some of the nitty-gritty about competing for talent. So we want to be empowering our employees. We're going to be paying attention to things like shift swaps, right? Again, different terminology for different industries. But if you're not empowering your employees to be able to give up a shift that they can't work, but they're on the schedule for, and another employee needs to be empowered to pick up that shift, and things like eligibility, skill level, experience level, availability, requests for time off, existing schedules, all of that needs to automatically be handled. If you don't have a platform that's allowing your employees to handle when they can't work, other than to just not show up, then they're going to continue to just not show up. You need to give them another option that doesn't necessarily require them calling in and explaining to their manager how they can't show up and then being yelled at by the manager, because then they just won't call. So platforms like TimeForge can handle shift swapping. Each platform handles it slightly differently. Some will handle things like skill levels, like I was mentioning, some won't. TimeForge does. If you don't have a request system, kind of the same deal. You need to make sure that your employees have a way to submit requests that doesn't involve sticky notes or a paper calendar. If managers are still using a paper calendar or sticky notes, I can guarantee you your organization has a higher turnover rate than your competitors who aren't. Those sticky notes get lost. The managers never tell the employees whether they get the day off or not. I spoke to a manager less than a year ago who was explaining very proudly how he will never tell his employees whether they get the day off or not because he wants to make sure he can call them in. So if your employees are taking the time to manage their schedule and submit to managers when they need the day off and managers are unresponsive, employees can't plan their lives and they will go work somewhere else. So you need a nice streamlined request and availability system that allows managers insights to things like whether approving that request will make them short-staffed or not. That way your managers can manage, and the transparency will help with retention and culture. Bid shifts and transfer bids are kind of bonus items. Transfer bids are going to be mostly applicable to larger organizations. Bid shifts are going to be, hey, there's, an employee, a new hire never showed up for training day one. They were scheduled on Thursday. I need to pull someone in, but I don't know who can work it. So a manager can publish that there's a shift available for bid to employees who are eligible and available to work it. And then employees can quote unquote bid on it, which basically is just indicating that they want to work it. And then the manager can select the winner, or it can be first come, first served. So that's how it works inside TimeForge. That's really handy even for single store operators. Transfer bids are really for multi-unit chains where you can do that same process, but across locations. So it kind of lets your stores become their own internal gig economy. So the way TimeForge does this is the borrowing manager who is short-staffed for a given shift publishes that transfer bid shift out. And according to corporate configuration, any geographically nearby locations, which could be a 20-mile radius or a 60-mile radius, whatever makes sense for your organization, those eligible available employees are notified that there's a new shift available at those other stores. And then they can bid on it. And then the borrowing manager can select who's going to work it. The lending manager, so the home store manager, who is lending their employee to the borrowing manager, can also have full visibility into that transferred employee. This is pretty powerful for larger organizations because you're allowing that empowerment of your employees, but you're not slowing the process down with a lot of HR intervention or paperwork. The system just handles it and transfers that employee over and then drops the employee out of that borrowing location when they're no longer needed. It also has some overtime enforcement in it too. You also need to be offering a reliable schedule. This is back to getting out of the chaos. Once the schedule is published, that's the schedule. There's going to be emergencies. But if your manager is making more than 1 or 2 changes after a schedule is published every week, it wasn't a good plan. So if you're making a plan and then completely changing it, you didn't have a good plan. So you need to do better planning if you're making a lot of changes to your schedules. You also need to be scheduling at least 2 weeks in advance. The folks that you're competing for talent with are already doing that. So if you aren't allowing your employees to plan their lives and know when they're working, but the guy across the street will let them know 2 weeks in advance what they're planning to work, they're probably going to go across the street. In some areas of the country, Fair Workweek regulations make this mandatory. In some areas of the country, Fair Workweek regulations make 3 weeks in advance scheduling mandatory. And there are pretty harsh penalties and fines if you don't adhere to that. If you're in the middle of the country, aside from Chicago, this probably doesn't apply to you. But whether it's mandatory or not in your area, it is definitely industry best practice at this point. So if your managers are scheduling Sunday night for the shifts that start Monday, again, I can guarantee your turnover is higher than it should be. You also need to make sure that you're providing your employees and managers with the tools they need, right? So that's training, that clear training path, clear career pathing, software as needed. Of course, I'm a software person these days, so I'm highly invested in software and the efficiency that it can offer teams. But that's also going to involve process. So if you haven't looked at your processes recently and made sure that they're optimized, you should be doing that. Now we're going to talk about similar competing for talent, but we want to make sure that we're focusing on applicant enablement. So we talked about employees. Now let's talk about applicants and what you're sending the message of. You need to have an online digital job board that's easy to use. That's critical. It's not optional anymore. You need a short and simple application. And when I say short and simple, I'm saying like first name, last name, what job do you think you want to work? Phone number. There's very rare instances where the old school, very long 7-page application can still apply. If you still have a very long application and you haven't modified your job application within the last 2 or 3 years, you likely are losing a lot of eligible candidates simply because they don't want to fill out extra paperwork and the other jobs they applied to were a lot easier. You need to be using social media. I'm not saying you need to get millennial with it by any means, but you need to go to where your applicants are. And a lot of them are on social media. You should be getting creative. If you have a brick and mortar location where you have customers shopping and you're not putting an announcement on the speaker every few hours saying, would you like to come work here? We have a great team. Please come apply at the manager's office. Maybe you should, right? You need to be recruiting everywhere that you can. Community engagement, lots of, you can do all sorts of events. You need to know how to leverage job aggregators. So especially for small independents, the job aggregator market can be a little bit overwhelming. If you have more locations for larger organizations, the job aggregators tend to come recruit your organization a little bit more aggressively. So you probably are already working with a lot of them. But it's important to know the difference between a job board and a job aggregator. So like LinkedIn is a job aggregator. It has little spiders that go crawl all over the internet and look for job postings on job boards and then compile them together on LinkedIn. A job board is where you're actually posting your postings directly. Now you can post on LinkedIn, but the majority of jobs listed on LinkedIn were aggregated. You also need to be leveraging employee referrals. I don't think I can beat that point any further. But if you have invested in culture before 2020, those employee referrals were happening organically. So if you've been struggling with turnover over the last 2 or 3 years and you have not gotten an overwhelming amount of employee referrals for job candidates, you need to seriously assess your culture. We're going to step it up a little bit more, employer branding and culture visibility. When you've got an applicant or a job candidate coming in for an interview, or even if they're not coming in for an interview, if they're just walking around your store or your restaurant trying to decide if they should apply, they're going to be looking for some key pieces, right? They want to know whether the employees seem happy when they walk in. Do they get greeted? with smiles? Does everyone look tired and dead on their feet? Are there professional and clear processes? Does it look like a well-oiled machine? Or is there going to be chaos? Is the manager friendly? Or are they going to be working for someone who ruins their day every day? Are there flexible options, right? For attire, for schedules? Are the wages competitive? That's important. Right now, it's not as important as culture. If you look at any of the statistics about why turnover is increased, people are wanting to chase what they love right now. So wages are definitely important, but culture and investing in retention is even more. And does the work look fun? These are all things that you can influence with your processes and how you stage your store for candidates, because you are now a salesman. Your entire organization, if you're struggling with hiring, everyone's a salesman. You're trying to sell the jobs. Okay, I'm going to do a quick overview of TimeForge at this point, and then we will we'll wrap up. If you have some questions, feel free to drop them into the chat or raise your hand, and I'll be happy to address them. We're very proud. We've earned a lot of badges around usability, and our customers are very happy with us. We've got some great, amazing badges that we've gotten over the past several months and years. This is from our fourth study. As promised, I was going to show you one of the pieces of data that we pulled. So this orange line is turnover for retail, the national average. And again, that's retail as a whole. And then the blue line is turnover for TimeForge users. So when I said that this was shocking and unbelievable, this is what I was talking about. Turnover rates for companies that use TimeForge are dramatically lower over the last almost 3 years than the national average turnover rates. This is when I want to give you a quick overview of what TimeForge does and some of the ways that we help impact that number. This is going to be kind of a broad overview. If you'd prefer to not look at a PowerPoint and you'd prefer like a live demo, please feel free to reach out. We do that all day long. One of the main benefits of TimeForge is its flexibility. So these are kind of the broad sweeping features that everyone or almost every customer uses inside TimeForge, but there are kind of configurable hidden features that end up making a pretty big organizational impact, but it's kind of tailored to what your organization needs. So typically we'll talk through what's important to your organization and what's working well and what's not, and start closing gaps. And then over the course of about 6 months for a new implementation, we'll add more and more features and bells and whistles that help tighten those gaps to where you're not just where you wanted to be, but you've improved beyond that. So there's a lot of smaller pieces that we can enable. Broad strokes, though, this is what a store level dashboard for leaders, that could be a store manager, a regional director, a department manager, store second, head chef, whatever makes sense. Any leadership at a location, which could be a store or a storefront, is going to be here. Each of these little widgets on this dashboard are configurable, so you can move them around. Each leader can make sure that this dashboard is optimized for whatever they find to be the most valuable insights. All of this data also is in real time. So TimeForge integrates to over 60 point of sale and payroll vendors. So data can synchronize in real time. I think our slowest connector on a point of sale is every 30 minutes, to give your managers those real time insights. Most of them synchronize every minute or every 15 minutes. That way, your managers are not looking at end of week reports and going, oh man, we really missed on labor. They can see it right when it's happening or even before it happens. If we know your sales are lower than they were anticipated to be by 10 a.m., that might be an indicator to your manager that the afternoon's going to be slow and they probably need to send some people home or find some side work that needs done to get ahead for tomorrow. Besides point of sale platforms, we can also pull other labor determinants. So net sales, gross sales, customer counts, transaction counts, all of those are pretty applicable to restaurants and retail. But we also work with hoteliers and resorts where we can pull from a property management system and look at things like reservations, or other labor determinants like call volume for call centers. It's all really flexible in how it pulls in. The reason we care so much about those labor determinants is because we want to make sure that the labor recommendations that the system will make automatically with its AI are smart. we won't be one of the systems that makes poor recommendations about what to do with your labor. If we're going to make a recommendation, we want it to be very insightful and accurate. And the way that we do that is by making sure that we're predicting those labor determinants accurately. So we've invested inordinate amounts of time and money making sure that we can predict sales volume or determinant volume well. And we're not looking at weekly numbers. We actually predict in quarter hour departmental groupings. And with those numbers, if we look at our hourly accuracy, we're on average 98.87% accurate at predicting what you're going to sell or what your determinant volume is going to look like. The average retail manager is between 11 and 16% wrong for that same metric, and we're just about 1% wrong per hour on average. That accurate forecasting allows us to make really accurate labor recommendations. One of the things that I think is really important to lay the foundation on for existing customers of TimeForge and for new users of TimeForge is that really any labor platform, in fact, any software that your business uses, is just a communication tool, right? It's going to have bells and whistles. It's going to have great features that can really help close gaps, but mostly it's just making sure that the right people are seeing the right data at the right time and knowing what to do with it. We've also got communication tools inside the platform for team messaging, posting company bulletins, chat tools. You can push out if you've got a no call, no show, you can push out a bulk message to all cashiers or all servers who are not currently on the schedule for this afternoon that you need someone to call the store and report in. So there's lots of handy pieces that help with that communication aspect, in addition to kind of the baked in, I'm going to publish a schedule and you can see the schedule. Back to the flexibility, TimeForge also allows clocking in from multiple options. You can clock in from your point of sale if it's a supported point of sale integration that has that. So most restaurant point of sales, you can clock in and out from, and it'll synchronize into TimeForge just fine. We'll also push the schedule over so you can enforce inside your POS. Any computer with internet, any tablet with internet, any smartphone. So pretty much any internet enabled device. There's apps where you can use the web clock to clock in and out. You can allow employees to do it from their own dashboard like we are here, which is really great, especially for office environments. If you want like corporate to be clocking in and out, or if you're tracking like time per project or anything like that. And then we also have a hardware timekeeping device. It's a touchscreen fingerprint, non-biometric time clock called the Time Machine. Yes, fingerprints without biometrics. Happy to dive into that with you if that piqued your curiosity. Another key with TimeForge is with our applicant tracking and onboarding platform and our certification and document tracking for existing employees. You get to present a professional, clean, streamlined employer brand. And if you haven't invested in that yet, you need to, whether that's with us or another company. It's really, really important that your new hires, your applicants, your existing employees all feel that you're investing in their ease of use and making their lives easier rather than more complicated. So digital document storage, digital onboarding, digital paperwork for the I-9s or E-Verify integrations for your managers or for HR to have a little bit more usability. Any certification tracking like safe food handling or alcohol service certification, allowing them to submit those documents online from their own dashboard and then managers reviewing it. TimeForge can also enforce that if the certification has expired or was never submitted, that employee can't work that position. So you can make sure that you're staying extra compliant. And you can even print reports of everyone's certifications and their numbers so that you know exactly who's on the schedule and who's allowed to be there. Back to the communication. It's pretty important, especially right now, that you're letting employees have on-demand access to the information they want. They may not think about it when they're at the location. So they need an employee app. This is a screenshot of the employee dashboard. So you want to make sure that whenever they're thinking about checking the schedule or checking on their request status or reviewing a time card, they have access to it. They should not ever need to call the manager to ask about those things, and they should not have to drive to a location to find out what the status on those things are. And then we love our customers. If you take a look at like the TimeForge testimonials page, if you know anyone who's using TimeForge, talk to them, ask how our customer service is. Or if you don't know anyone, call me and I'll give you some references to our real customers. We love our customers. They have helped us build this product from the ground up with their feedback and by taking the time to actually communicate with us about what works for them and hey, it'd be cool if. So we show that love by making sure that we're taking really good care of them if they need a training. So I think it's really important if you're not a TimeForge customer and you're interested in this product, you know that you're never going to be a number with us. We know the operations of each of our customers deeply. We like to just call and check in. I think it's really important that you know there's always help available if you're struggling with a labor shortage, if you're just looking for a labor solution, and maybe you don't even know where to start. I live in this world and I love talking about it, and I've been doing it for a long time. So if you're not even necessarily looking to purchase TimeForge, but you're curious about maybe what recommendations for your organization might be, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk. So we have a help button on every single screen to make sure that you have access whenever you need it. Mobile is also pretty critical right now. So our mobile applications, both the employee app and the manager app, have a 95% adoption rate among our employee users, or sorry, that's the employee adoption rate. The manager adoption rate's actually even higher for the manager app. We don't charge for the employee app or the manager app. And each of them gives insights into what's going on. So employees can check their schedule from the employee app. They can check their request status. Did the manager approve them off for Thursday? And they can check their time card if you want them to. They can also submit requests. It makes everything just in the palm of their hand. And then the manager application is a little bit more robust. It's got actionable insights like here's where your forecasted sales are, here's what your projected sales are. We do make a distinction between those two things inside the system. And here's what your actuals are so far today. Here's where your labor was planned. Here's where your actual labor is so far today. You can send messages, you can review schedules and attendance. There's lots of information inside that manager app to make sure that your managers are seeing, departmental sales or hourly sales. Regionals can access store level sales from a dashboard. So those apps are pretty critical to kind of that holistic operational improvement to what the experience of your team looks like. Here's what one of our customers says about us. I thought I'd share this with you. I really appreciate Erin's feedback on this. Okay, at this point, Jennifer, do we have any questions that have been submitted?
Yeah, we have a couple. Let's see. First question here says, if I already have a scheduling system, but we are interested in some of the smart forecasting piece, what does a typical transition look like?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. We actually run into that kind of question more than you might think. We try to work with whatever your existing tech stack is. So if you're in love with your existing scheduling platform, that's awesome. Great. We'll just kind of fill the gaps, if that makes sense. So what we would want to do is sit down and learn more about the architecture of your existing scheduling platform and if it can consume the forecasts that we're going to make, right? That would be step one, because if we can't get those forecasts into it, or it doesn't have the ability to digest the data, then we're kind of at an impasse, right? So once we can make sure that it can digest our data or any data around forecasts, then we'd want to get our hands on your sales data, which should be really easy with most POSs, and start running those through the forecasts. Usually will take about 6 weeks for us to get some decent default results from the robots without making any adjustments. And then once those 6 weeks are done, we will start tuning as needed to make sure that you're getting the best forecasting results possible. And that tuning process can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months, just depending on how much data we have. So if you're a newer store, we may recommend that you kind of hold off and wait for your sales to stabilize. But we can totally peel that piece off. You don't have to buy the entire platform.
All right, another one here. Who does TimeForge compete with?
Oh, that's going to be kind of variant by industry. I think our biggest competitor is Excel. Honestly, a lot of the things that we're providing optimization on, folks are trying to do inside spreadsheets or with sticky notes. So I think that's what we run it, or Google Sheets now, right? But we do have some competitors listed on our website. I'm never going to throw mud. But if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to share insights about some of the big names that we're up against in head-to-heads during sales.
Audrey, there's another question around store size, and can this be used for single store, or is your system geared toward enterprise level?
Oh, it's both actually. So we started in 2007. We've been around. We're kind of a dinosaur in the software world, which is ridiculous. But we launched in 2007, and we exclusively targeted small independent restaurants. So all of our customers were single store operators at that time. We grew organically through word of mouth up market into enterprise. And kind of as we went, we learned lessons about how to make sure that we could scale up. And so at this point, we've been doing it so long that we can handle single store operators. Our smallest customer has 2 employees, and they've been with us for over a decade at this point. Or we can scale all the way up to thousands of locations and dozens of thousands of employees with large stores. I think our largest single location right now has like 300 or 350 employees at a single store.
Great. That's all the questions that have come in.
Wonderful. Well, if anyone has more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat.
For all of our attendees today, we will be releasing the recording shortly. Audrey is available on LinkedIn as well. If you would like any type of further demonstration, please reach out to Audrey or myself. We'll make sure that you have email communication and our contact information following the webinar today. We'd be happy to set up a more in-depth review of the system. Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.